Right, we seem to be live. Okay, hi people out there. We seem to have some people connected. Hey Paul, Peter, Jay, born in washing machine, and Maharisram. So if you can just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me all right and see me okay. And we seem to have a fairly good connection this morning, so touch wood, it continues that way. Thanks, Christian. So it's all going according to plan. So welcome everyone, and I hope you've all been well and enjoying the offerings that Jatindra has been providing in my absence. I've been fortunate to be on extended retreat and then attending another retreat. So it's been a really lovely what's called a Vasa period in our tradition, which is the traditional 3 months rainy season in Asia anyway. However, we also managed to have a lot of rain, so there you go. And now we've come out of that Vasa period, so it doesn't really mean that much other than we perhaps resume a few more duties than what we do during that 3 months. So that's all been really nice, and I hope that all of you at some stage get an opportunity to be in retreat in some capacity, whether it's just at your own home doing retreat or attending a retreat, which can be really supportive. But it's retreat time's an opportunity just to put everything down and to be in solitude. Even if you're on with a group, you can still be in solitude if it's a quiet retreat. And it allows the practice to go a lot deeper. And then you take that deepening understanding and integrate it into your daily life and practice. And so it's like this. This is how we do it. We just keep deepening, peeling back the layers of the onion to understand what this Dharma, what this reality is all about. So, something happened, you're frozen. I know you're not. Okay. I don't appear to be frozen to myself, but that's no guarantee that I'm not frozen. So anyway, I'm just making some talk while it allows people to join and get the notification. So I think we've allowed enough time. And if anyone hasn't attended these sessions before, what we normally do is just have about 20 to 30 minutes of guided meditation, and then a similar amount of time for a few questions and answers on meditation, which we attempt to answer to the best of our ability. So it's about an hour or so. And again, it's a nice opportunity for those who can join live to feel some sort of connection with Sangha, because I know there's a lot of people out there who are isolated and don't have a local Sangha or even an online Sangha. So if this offering is of help, then we're both myself and Jatindra are really happy to offer that for people. Okay. So today I thought, it just came out of the ether, I thought today's meditation, and perhaps the Q&A too, we could focus on examining and investigating this concept of no self, or what's called anatta in Buddhism. And the concept of no self is also something that permeates a lot of other traditions, both ancient traditions and also the contemporary spiritual things that are popping up. And you might or may not be aware, but this concept of no self can be very confusing for people. And then it can also be something that people pick up as an idea and run with it. And then it just becomes some sort of, what would you say? It almost becomes a kind of a dogma, and people walk around saying, there is no self, as a way of excusing their own behavior or others' behaviors, or to repress emotions, or to just try and make sense of the world. And when we pick up a very profound teaching of Dharma, point of Dharma, and we don't really understand it, and it just becomes an idea or a rhetoric, then it's problematic, and it really misses the spirit of what this teaching's about. Not only the spirit, the actual, the true meaning. So I thought today, it's perhaps one of the most complex terms in Buddhism to really understand at a deep level. But you can start to get a sense of it, and you can only understand this concept of no self when it becomes a direct experience, not just a concept or an intellectual idea. And then people might feel a little bit more comfortable with it. Okay? So I think it's just more people saying hi. So hi. And let's see how we go. I'll just attempt to guide you through a meditation to touch on this very theme of no self, or anatta, if you're familiar with the Pali. So please find a comfortable position wherever you are. And what I traditionally do is I like to put a bell for people to gaze at. If you like to work with open eyes meditation. Otherwise, you can just sit with your eyes closed and follow some of the guidance. So is sound okay for everyone at the moment still? Seem to have a big truck entering our vicinity, but as long as you can hear me. Thanks, Thorn. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to give you something to gaze on if you're gazers. And please just come into a comfortable seated position for this guided meditation. Allowing whatever time you need to feel comfortable on your cushion, on your chair, making sure that the back is upright, supported. But that your body's comfortable and relaxed. This is most important. And whatever sounds you can hear, you simply allow them to come and go. Whatever thoughts are currently racing through the mind, don't block them, don't force them away. Just notice the current state of the mind. And in noticing, without judging, without pushing, they'll just simply start to settle down. And likewise with the body, feelings or sensations. If you can just be with it rather than constantly shifting or trying to get away from it, that too will start to settle down. So when we begin any meditation, there's a few key things that we should try to bring into it. We need to just relax and allow and be open. We open to whatever's there, whatever's arising. We allow it to come and go in a relaxed frame of mind. And we bring a certain level of interest and enthusiasm to the practice. We really want to be here. We really want to investigate our own minds. And that's all meditation is. It's simply getting to understand this mind-body experience. No flying in the air, no tripping elsewhere, no attaining some blissful states. Our primary purpose should be to understand this very reality, this mind. And to really understand this mind, we need a certain level of calm. A certain degree of tranquility. When everything's stirred up in the mind, it's very difficult to see clearly. So just for a few minutes, use whatever object works for you to bring the mind into a place of calm and stillness. If you can comfortably relax, focusing on the breath as your object, or focusing on the sensations of the body, or simply resting in awareness itself. whatever works for your particular style. Nothing's better or worse. Whatever's most suitable for your particular proclivities. Or even if you use a mantra, that's okay too. It's important to know and respect what works best for you. So once the mind has reached a certain level of calmness, and it doesn't have to be deep absorption for this particular meditation. It'll do whatever it is. A certain level of calm. We can start to investigate this body, this mind, these sense experiences. The calmness is a springboard into developing insight, or what's called vipassana. So as you're sitting in meditation, bring your awareness to all the different sounds that you can hear now, whether they be sounds in your own environment or the sounds you're hearing coming through the microphone from my environment. The birds, the trucks, the sound of my voice. Simply open your mind to listening without labels, without concepts. Notice how a sound enters through the ears and has a certain sense impression. and then dissolves. And notice how it comes from nowhere. It seems to be coming from outside. We have this framework of inside and outside, these perceptions. But when you just hear without labeling, without names, can you notice just how empty the sounds are? They don't come with a name or a concept. We add them. We apply them through years and years of conditioning. Conditioned perceptions. But without the name, without adding the concept, sound is. So one of the most profound teachings of the Buddha was to encourage us, when in hearing, let there be only the heard. When in seeing, let there be only the seen. In the sensing, let there be only the sensing. In the thinking or the cognizing, let there be only the cognized. And in the feeling, let there be only the feeling. As you breathe and get a sense of your whole body sitting here, being here. Can you simply just feel without adding any labels or concepts to that experience? Or at the very least, Just notice all the labels and concepts and imaginings that we add on to this experience of being alive right now. And by that I mean to see these deeply rooted views we hold about who we think we are. We feel a pain and we apply, this is my pain in my back. And when we do that, can you see all the images, the conditioned views we have, where we limit ourselves to a particular form in space? We draw the boundaries with our perceptions about where we start and end. And so it becomes my body. And the body has all the names of the body parts. Which then becomes my hand, my head, and so on. And we construct this constantly becoming this self contained within this body. So just investigate this for a few minutes at the level of the body. And start to see that constructing process going on from moment to moment. The way we contract and limit ourselves within these boundaries of my body. And what happens when you see these labels and stop attaching to them, stop believing them, and allow them just to dissolve? And the same principle, the same investigation and practice we can apply to our thinking. To just pick up the next thought with discernment and investigation. To see how it becomes my idea, my thought, defining who and what we are through a single thought. And where does this thought come from? It comes from nowhere. And when this thought comes, where does it stay? It never does. And when this thought goes, where does it go to? So how can these thoughts be who I am? And if I believe that I am my thinking process, my views, my beliefs, my opinions, even my values, why are they so inconsistent? Why do they never stay in one place? And why can't I take hold of them? So we investigate this assumption of a self, of a permanent, changeless, fixed self in this very experience of this body and mind. To see if we can actually find one. Can they be found in our emotions, which are constantly triggered by our reactions of things in the world, within ourselves, of liking or disliking, or being indifferent to? These changeable emotional states. in a constant flux every day, every moment. So this is what the Buddha was encouraging us to do, to investigate our own experience and to see when we look clearly, without bias, removing the veils of conditioned perceptions, to discover that there is no permanent, fixed self in any of these, what's called the khandhas, the aggregates. They're defined by their very fact of not being a self. It doesn't mean they don't exist, that we don't experience them. But we start to see that our habit of labeling them as a me, as a mine, is what causes us to suffer. When we simply allow them to be what they are, changeable, dynamic, and of a not self nature. Then there's no problem. They just are as they are. Arising, changing, and dissolving within this experience that we call life. And when you're investigating this concept of non-self, it's important not to waste time thinking too much about it, but rather contemplating it in your direct experience. Just having those little aha moments, those glimpses through intuition, is what allows you to really start to understand this profound teaching of the Buddha, of anatta. But again, don't force these things. Just relax and look with an open mind a quiet mind, and insights come naturally, spontaneously. Okay, well, I hope okay. Seemed that we had a few problems there. For some people, I don't know if it was for everybody. We've got some mixed views here, good sound, Wi-Fi down, sound issues, stopped hearing. Okay, well, someone could hear clearly the whole time. So that's good. So it might mean that it's on other people's ends. Okay, so Pete, no problem. It was what it was. So for those who did hear the whole way through, or even if you only just heard a little bit, maybe you heard what you needed to hear. Good. Wonderful practice in patience and listening, yeah. And just to mention though, there were quite a few periods where I didn't say anything. So you may have thought your sound was down. The sound was down, but it was just me being quiet for a while. So who knows? We tether through our phone because we live in a place that doesn't have ADSL, doesn't have NBN broadband, and has very poor mobile phone reception. So this is the best we can do. And so it is a practice for all of us in patience. Okay, so I'll just pick up a few questions. It'd be good to perhaps ask the questions related to that meditation if possible, and it just then gives us a focus rather than being all over the place. So Michael Carlton's asked, what is the difference between emptiness and no self? And I'm glad you asked that question, Michael, because I was going to mention it in the meditation, in the guided meditation, but I didn't want to confuse people or bring in lots of other different concepts. And essentially, the teaching on no self or non-self is probably better rather than, because when people say there's no self, that's when they can pick up that extreme view and go, there is no self. What I was trying to get at in that teaching was to see the non-self nature within the khandhas, within the 5 khandhas, the 5 aggregates, rather than to pick up a view that says there absolutely is no self. And because the Buddha always gave emphasis to the not self nature of things, because clearly, in a relative sense, there is a self. I'm here talking to you, and we all have an agreement that I am me and you are you, and you have a name and a body. And we need those to function in the world. So if we all go about saying there's no self, then we're being extreme, and we're also being deluded if it's coming out of that intellectual view. But at one level that's true. There's no fixed permanent self that we can point to within this mind-body experience. Okay, and that is the teaching of emptiness. When we talk about emptiness, it's the same thing. It's not that I am empty and that emptiness is an absolute. Whenever we make these things kind of absolute within the relative world of relations, it always becomes a problem and an extreme. But within this mind-body experience, it is empty of a self. And that's what emptiness is really pointing to, of a permanent, fixed, unchangeable self. And that doesn't just apply to the selves that we've been talking about of our human body. It also applies to all phenomena. So a tree is empty of a fixed, unchangeable self. Maybe that's more obvious to you because we don't give trees personalities and names. I mean, we give them botanical names, another label, but we don't think that a tree has a fixed self to it. But we do often think a tree is contained within its own trunk and branches, and we get upset when a tree dies, some of us, or a plant we love, and we fail to see the interconnectivity of everything, that this tree is not separate from the space that it inhabits or the elements that it's connected to. So that tree is empty of a permanent, fixed, separate self, the same as us, the same as all phenomena. So that's what emptiness really means. People can pick up emptiness and it becomes another nihilistic view. You know, it seems the word itself is quite charged, isn't it? It seems like, oh, if it's empty, there's nothing there. It's black. It's void. It's a black hole of nothingness. And that's not what emptiness means, and it's not what non-self means. It just means we can't find a discrete entity separate from the elements that it is that are presented. So I hope that makes sense, because these teachings of emptiness and no self are the highest teachings, they're the ultimate teachings in Buddhism. And they're often only taught when people have a firm grounding already and understanding of the basics, the preliminary practices, for the very reason that they don't understand and they start making extreme statements out of conceptual understanding. So to really understand emptiness and no self, you have to see it with insight, with intuition, within your own experience, which is what I was, gently just trying to guide you to. And many of you have probably already had those experiences and understandings. And when you have those experiences and understandings, there's no need to go about making extreme statements about it, All right. So thanks for that question, Michael. And someone's asked, what is kind of this meditation? Is kind of jhana meditation? So what kind of meditation was I teaching? Is it a kind of jhana meditation? No, not really jhana meditation. No, jhana is an absorption meditation. And if you want to know what jhana meditation is, I've put some in the Theravadan playlist. But all jhana is a deep state of absorption or concentration, samadhi. But people can get stuck in jhanas and just, because they're so blissful and so peaceful, they go in there and they'll develop jhanas just for the sake of developing jhanas. But the Buddha taught the jhanas as a deep absorption, because if you have such a deep concentration and then you come out of it and you investigate something like we just did, the non-self nature of the body, and to investigate the khandhas, then you're going to understand at the deepest level, and it will be a very powerful understanding which will perhaps make you immovable in terms of deeply understanding that reality, unshakable conviction. So that's the point of jhanas. To get into deep jhanas, you need a lot of practice time. Not everyone. Some people can fall into them very easily. But a lot of quiet and solitude, and people go off to forests and caves to practice these to the deepest level, or on long-term retreats. But then there are the occasional people who just have a natural proclivity to fall easily into these jhanic states for various reasons of past conditions. Okay, this connects with the Jesuit prayer I pray called the Sassis. I don't know what that is. Sounds interesting. Where's the questions? Bear with. It's all just scrolled all the way down. Oh, okay. The suspice means receive. I believe the point is the interdependence. As you said, the feelings, emotions, thoughts are there, but we can choose to observe the things and realize the interdependence. Nice. Apologies, I'm just trying to find where I'm up to. There's lots of questions. Intellectually, it makes sense that I am not the doer, but until this dawns as an actual realization, how should one act? Knowing that I am not the doer, what should I do or not do? Yeah, it's simply observing, because in that meditation, I didn't expect everyone to immediately see the way that we construct a self, and then for it all to just dissolve into emptiness. But to start to see how we construct is where we start. So when you are interacting, going about, just to notice how a thought, a feeling, a sense in the body, we start to grasp onto it and feel uncomfortable or want to get rid of it or want to react to something. And in that moment, it's a great teaching of, here I am acting out of a sense of self. Defensiveness, reactivity only comes because we believe that these feelings of me and mine, or we go after something out of desire because we believe it'll make us happy. So just looking at the very machinations of how we're constantly creating a self can start to unravel that notion of me and mine and me as the doer. So, the doer is always trying to control situations, manipulate situations. Just notice that. It would only take a minute before we see that in action. And it's just that very noticing that wakes us up. Okay? It's not that you have to keep doing something to get rid of the doer, because the thing that tries to get rid of the doer is the doer. All right? So just notice how the doer is always in play. Just like you'd be, just watching someone out of interest. Just watch yourself with interest, but without judgment, or, you're not looking to catch yourself out either, because then you just make yourself tense. Just be a compassionate observer. Oh, look, here I am again trying to control this situation. Here I am again contracting because of what someone said to me or what I've thought about myself. There's this constant contraction, becoming, contraction. It's going on every moment. And we just wake up to that. And then the formal meditation just gives us a context of quietude to see it more clearly. That's why we sit. That's why we stop. Because if we're constantly go, 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 it's hard to see those machinations playing out. But the more you sit and create space and then have the intention to kind of continue the practice post-meditation to see how these things are playing themselves out, then we see more and more. And it can be uncomfortable at first. You know, when people start meditating, they think, I was much happier before I started meditating. They weren't really, they just didn't see what was going on. So when we start to see how we are constantly fooling ourselves or chasing after things or running away from things, it's uncomfortable. So it takes quite a bit of, courage and patience and a willingness to, keep going and actually have faith in the Dharma, that this is the right path to come out of this suffering. Or you can just stay asleep and keep suffering. The options are pretty clear. But I think most people don't want to live in darkness and live in suffering. So what do they say? No pain, no gain. But you don't have to add on to the pain. That's what I'm saying too. Just be kind, be gentle with yourself, and just treat it lightly. Don't make a big deal of it, because we're all in the same boat here. Okay, so a lot of people could hear the birds. Okay, we're often taught in Advaita that the mind and its thoughts are not me, yet the objective world, seemingly separate, is me. Oh, I see, yeah. We shouldn't identify with what we do and should with what we don't. I'm not sure of that last question. But that seemingly separate world is me. It doesn't mean then we think, oh, this isn't me, but that's me. It's just saying that teaching is just pointing to the non-separation of self and the world. And again, that's going into another territory that's very profound and can only be really understood when one enters into that non-separation and recognizes that we were never separate from the world. All these separations come about through conceptual labeling and habitual patterning. And when all those patterns and labels have genuinely dissolved, then the non-separateness of self and other is seen clearly. Okay, that's what it means. But it doesn't mean the world becomes another me or a separate, or is the real me. It's simply non-separation. So I hope that, I encourage you, if you're really interested, you could read more about that, but don't read too much. Just investigate it within yourself. What does that really mean, that I'm not separate from the world? It's not that the world's out there. The world is actually, a projection of our minds. And it's all contained within the one awareness, really. So Ryakan has asked, as my practice becomes deeper, I get more sensitive to people and the world. Is this a common occurrence on the path to becoming a monk? I'm not sure if it's a common occurrence on the path to becoming a monk, but it's a common occurrence when one starts practicing meditation, that we do become more sensitive. And that's a good thing. But like all things, it needs a balance. So if we're becoming hypersensitive and can't stand being in the world or around people, then we need to work with that skillfully. Maybe for a time we need to withdraw to develop a certain strength and resilience, and then come back to the world and people and test our practice. But if we're finding that, we're sensitive in the sense that people are doing our heads in, the world is too chaotic, which it is, and we can't cope, then it is good to put some protective boundaries around for a time until we're stronger. But, we can't all go and live in caves on the mountains, on the hilltops, and that's not necessarily the best thing to do anyway. For some people, that's their path. For most of it, it's to be in the world and to allow the world to be our best teacher, because it's got plenty of challenges, hasn't it? Okay. So Pete's asking, that was a beautiful meditation. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Do your guided meditations have more benefit than our own personal meditations? I feel more focused with your guided meditations. I wouldn't say they have more benefit, but they can just be of help to some people at some times. It really depends on where we're at, what we need. So if they're helpful, that's why we're offering them. I'm happy they're helpful. Sometimes you might just not want to listen to anyone and just sit in the silence. And then that will be more helpful. So, yeah, everyone's different, hey? Is the mind part of the self then? Is the mind part of the self then? Well, what I was thinking then, because that's a question that it's just kind of mixing all these different concepts. So to answer it conceptually might just be not that helpful. So Matt, I would encourage you to go and listen to a recent teaching that I put up called, I'm just trying to think, it was the one before Nisargadatta. It's a guided meditation on the nature of the mind by Lama Shabka. So I think it's within the last week, and it's just got it's got a sun and a blue background, and I can't remember what it says, something like the nature of the mind is like the sun. That I feel would be the best meditation for you to go and listen to and do in relation to your question, to understand the nature of the mind. Because this idea of a mind and a self are concepts that we have to smash through in a gentle way, right? And to really investigate. They're assumptions. They're both assumptions. So let's not feed the assumptions. Go and listen to that meditation a few times. It's a brilliant teaching that Lama Shabka gave, and it's all about investigating this assumption about the mind. Okay. What are your personal synonyms for anatta? I don't have personal synonyms. Well, anatta just means non-self, the non-self nature of things. Okay. What do you think about couldn't not lose oneself at the threshold of it? My heartbeat changes and I got excited all the time. It feels so good. But every time I felt like, okay, that's enough for today. I think I understand what you're saying, Shinan or Sinan, that it you got to a point where you felt like perhaps you didn't want to go further into it. And that's okay. Just go to where you are. Just notice that your heartbeat's changing and you got excited or fearful or whatever, or you felt like, where am I in all of this? Because we do have to do a lot of work to hold on to a false view of the self, believe it or not. It's a hell of a lot of work. So dissolving the self, when we get to that, is a great relief. To keep constructing a self is where the dukkha is, where the stress is. But when we get to a point where we feel like, I don't know who I am anymore, everything's dissolving, it can be quite frightening. But it's simply the ego taking another deep, raising its head to say, I want to live, I want to keep going. So just see it like that. But, you don't have to push yourself off the cliff. One day you'll just willingly fly off the cliff and realize it's nowhere to fall to. It's free falling into empty space. But the point is to get to the threshold eventually. But you don't get to the threshold. This is what has to keep being seen through. We think that we're doing it to get something, to get somewhere. And this is what we have to keep seeing. This is the great delusion. That there's a me here that needs to do something to get rid of me, or there's a me here that needs to do something to get something other than me, enlightenment, whatever. It's the me that has to keep being seen through. This is what keeps fooling us. And this me that says it's no, I can't go any further, it's just another voice of the ego, that's all. Nothing to worry about. But just like I said before, just see through all the machinations of the way the self or the ego works and, laugh at it if you can. It's just not that serious if we can take that attitude. Okay. So Leslie's just reminding us of the Trinity of the God, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which is about the interdependence. And that's right. I mean, it's really interesting. In all traditions, you always find trinities or triads or triple this. So in Tibetan Buddhism, you have the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Namanikaya. In Theravada Buddhism, you have lots of the three characteristics of existence, and you can find all these interesting parallels. And again, they're just words and concepts pointing to a profound truth. And depending on what culture it came out of, what era, there were different words, different ways that people could understand these things, but they're all just words pointing to something beyond words. Okay. Peter's asking, is it more like not this, not that, or rather not non-described? Yeah. So neti is a good way of approaching this. Whenever we grasp something, whether it be at kind of the lower level of this is me as a self, or even at the higher level, this is ultimate reality, this is emptiness, this is truth. Neti was the way of always just letting go of that grasping mind that wants to hold on to things conceptually. And conceptual thinking and beliefs can become extremely subtle, even and fool us the deeper we go sometimes. And so we have to keep we have to be on our toes all the time, because that's where we can just get stuck and we think, I've got it now, and and we think it's beyond concepts or intellect, but it's not. It's still a very subtle grasping at a self view or a self that becomes, we think it's beyond something material, but it's not. It's just another form of grasping at a fine material level. All right, couple more questions. I think we're getting on. Would it be true to say that there is no self, but the feeling of self, which is like any other appearance in us, like a sensation or a sound? Yeah. The feeling of the self is really interesting, isn't it, to investigate? Particularly if you start to contemplate, when you were a baby or a very young child, this feeling of a self wasn't formed at all, or was starting to be formed, or was only very finely formed. But the older we get, if we get more stuck in the conditioning, that feeling of a self can become so concretized, so habitual. And then it's almost like, where did this come from? You know, we get so solidified in that view or that feeling. So this is why it's really good to start investigating it and go back and think, you know, when did this sense of self start to form? And can you remember that time where you didn't have that sense of self? And you're talking about a feeling of self, so I would encourage you in meditation just to look at that. Going, where is this feeling of self? Where does it sit in my body or in my sense in my head or something, you know? And when you do that, you start to realize that you can't actually find it, but we're walking around with it all the time. You know, it's like it's just the dream. We're just dreaming ourselves as these separate things. So waking up from the dream of this feeling of self is what will free us from it. Thanks for that question. That's I find that a really good one to investigate, particularly just before you go to sleep at night, as the mind's becoming a little calmer, a little less formed with this self-view. You start to ask, who am I? Who do I take myself to be? And it can be quite revealing just late at night when the unconscious becomes more to the fore. Okay, maybe just one or two more questions. How do I explain to my thinking mind the difference between being lost in thought as opposed to being fully present in non-dual, full merging with the here and now? Well, if you're lost in thought, I'm not sure that you need to explain to the thinking mind. The thinking mind just sees is the thing that's lost in thought. And if you're fully present, then there's nothing to think about. It's beyond the thinking. So you just know it. You just know when you're lost in thought, I'm lost in thought. And you see it. But you notice that when you're lost in thought, there's something within you that's not lost in thought and can never be lost in thought. So start to notice that quiet witness, you can call it, the awareness that actually knows that you're lost in thought. Because if you didn't have that awareness that knows you're lost in thought, you would just be lost in thought. So what knows? Ask what is knowing? So begin to know the knower, knowing, not the knower. Begin to become more familiar with the awareness of what knows when you're either lost in thought or present. But the thing is, if you're fully present, it's less likely that you're going to be going, oh, I'm fully present. Because if you're saying that you're labeling that you're fully present, then you're not genuinely present. If it turns into thinking and conceit. So but there's just awareness. There's the awareness of being present without there being anyone there who knows they're present, if you know what I mean. There's presence, awareness, without the awarer, without the knower. Okay, that probably could have confused you anymore, but okay. Joyce has also said your experience of a no self today comes with a certain fear. Yeah, exactly. Investigate that fear. Who's afraid? The one who believes that they are who they think they are. So it does come with a certain fear. So it does ask for a certain degree of courage and fearlessness, and trust. I think if you want to develop a little bit of trust and faith in the Dharma, in the masters, who remind us that there's nothing to fear, because what we're moving towards is freedom from fear, freedom from all fear and all suffering. So it requires a leap of faith, I guess, at the beginning. But if you can feel in your heart that these teachers are teaching out of love and compassion and inviting us, the Buddha said invites us to come and see for ourselves that the Dharma is actually the path towards the deathless and to fearlessness and to the ending of all of that suffering. But you have to have a certain degree of faith that, this is the path. If you look at the alternatives, for me, there's no alternative. The alternatives are just more of the same. If one wants to keep staying in the darkness of self and desires, of the worldly values, the worldly values and the way the world is just creating more of the same. Fear, hatred, greed. So we have to have a bit of faith and a bit of courage. All right. So it's, I just have a quick look. Oh, there's not too many questions. Oh, yeah, there is. Maybe one more, hey? One more question. I'm still here. I'm just reading. I'm not finding many questions. Okay, I think we've covered all the questions. Okay, actually, Aquia says Rigpa is the base for nature of mind. Yeah, so Rigpa from the Vajrayana teachings, Mahayana teachings, Rigpa is the awareness. Okay, Ma Rigpa is like ignorance. Rigpa is the base. I think that's what you question. Base for question nature of mind. Not sure what the question is. Okay, everybody. Well, that was kind of a profound topic to pick up today. But, there's a lot of the teachings on this, on my channel, from the various masters who've taught very clearly on it. So I would just encourage you to go and perhaps listen to whoever you're most aligned with, if you have doubts. But primarily, this teaching of non-self is something that we just need to see within our own experience. And if people are doing a head in, talking about it and trying to explain it, it's best just to put that aside and put aside any books if they're not helping clarify it. And look at your mind. That's where you're going to find the best understanding, the best teacher. If you can look with wisdom, I should say, a willingness to just see how we construct this self. And just seeing that day by day, this teaching of anatta will become very, very real for you. It will actually, you'll get it at the deepest level, and the doubts and confusions will disappear. So that's all I can say about that. But I wanted to bring it as a theme for the meditation because there are so many confusions and misconceptions and misuses of it. So we are all here as selves connecting in this non-self field. So I wish you all the best And Ayurjatindriya will see you in a fortnight, same time, same date. And yeah, may your week go well, may your day go well, and thanks for your attendance and for contributing what you all did too. All the best.